If you know anything about the current surplus firearm market, this tag should give a lot away. This particular M95 rifle was not from France. It was imported by Royal Tiger Imports from Ethiopia, where it spent perhaps decades stored in a barn. That detail matters not because this rifle is tied directly to the French resistance, but because it helps us understand the conditions weapons like this were kept in rather than the original province of this particular piece. We know variants of the M95 rifle were present in France during World War II, and we know the French resistance did use them. We covered that in more detail in previous videos, so check those out if you're interested. What this rifle is a useful example of what long-term storage in a far from ideal circumstance looks like on a rifle after it's been stored away in a place like a barn and then eventually pulled back out for use. In France, surplus weapons and civilian firearms were hidden away roughly around 1940 and perhaps even earlier. They were often hidden away in barns, sheds, lofts, places like that where firearms weren't preserved, they were just simply concealed. This rifle wasn't hidden in France, but the way it was stored helps illustrate what decades of neglect can do to a rifle when it is kept in these kinds of environments. And this one is extremely dirty. In order to clean it up, I'm going to start by focusing on the metal. To tear everything apart, of course I have to start with the screws. But it wasn't going to be that simple. This gun had other plans. Before I could even get the screws out, I had to clean each screw slot out individually in order to get the proper engagement with the screwdriver. Just to give you the idea of the scale of this particular project, an M95 rifle has somewhere around 40 to 50 individual parts. That's a lot of parts. With most of the major components disassembled, I began the cleaning process by placing each of these items into my DIY steam conversion chamber, which is made out of a wallpaper steamer I had laying around. The goal here is to help loosen up all the dirt and help convert red oxide, which is rust, into black oxide, which is a little more stable. I'm not trying to achieve a factory finish here. What I'm trying to do is preserve it. I want to stabilize this rifle so it can survive a few more generations and still be appreciated as a historical object and possibly a learning tool. Leaving this level of dirt and buildup that you can see here only accelerates rust and decay. Eventually, this rifle would basically self-destruct if I didn't intervene. While I did start using a screwdriver to excavate the worst of the dirt like a shovel, I went to my more traditional means afterwards, which is use the gentlest approach possible first, and that is WD-40 and a paper towel, and then move on from there. The reason for being so careful is I don't want to damage any of the original bluing, stamps, or markings that tell the story of this rifle. And I was actually very fortunate with this rifle and was pleasantly surprised there was a decent amount of the original bluing left underneath the grime. Now the smaller parts came out of the steamer and the larger component went in. At this point of the project, I'm zeroing in on the magazine housing / trigger guard assembly. There was a decent amount of tough buildup, and I actually use steel wool here. Again, I'm usually hesitant to use steel wool because it can damage the surface, but with this type of buildup, the brass brush really didn't cut it. Even after letting the barrel and the receiver marinate in the steamer for a while, there was a lot of buildup like what we saw on the magazine housing and trigger guard assembly, so I'm using steel wool again. Dirt like this is a haven for decay and moisture, which are really the natural enemies of these vintage firearms. The real problem was how packed it was in the tight corners. Steaming the initial cleaning hadn't gotten all of it out, and it really was not an easy thing to fit the tools around. I had to come back with picks, screwdrivers, and steel wool just to clean out these tight areas where the dirt had basically cemented itself into place. It's incredible how hard this dirt has become over its long life. Even after cleaning the exterior, I was amazed by how much of this grime had built up inside the receiver where the locking lugs engage. After this detailing work, the bolt did function a little better, but still I don't think it was as smooth as it should be. While I cleaned the outside body of the magazine housing and trigger assembly a moment ago, I am now having to detail all the internal components. So I had to fully disassemble the spring system, pop out all the pins, and dig out all this dirt just to clean it up. Did you know though that the Carcano N-block system that the Italians used was actually designed off of the monolicker system? Monolickers are basically the granddaddy of N-block designs. And for all you M1 Grand owners out there, you can thank Ferdinand van Monolicker for the lineage of design, all the way back to the late 1800s. This is the part I honestly couldn't wait to dig into. Do you think I'm odd for this? I probably am, but I really wanted to tear into this rifle just to see how the straight pull bolt action worked. So I really wanted to dissect this bolt. What fascinates me is the locking lugs engage through rotation, just like you would find on, let's say, a K98K, but unlike the K98K, the bolt handle only needs to be pulled straight back and pushed straight forward without any rotation of the bolt handle. This engineering marvel is accomplished through a series of helical grooves that are cut into these tubes that layer inside of each other. This ends up resulting in the locking lugs rotating in the very first short section of pull when you pull the bolt back. While the outside of the bolt was probably just as dirty as the rest of the rifle and needed the steel wool and chemicals to clean, the internals were surprisingly cleaner. Not perfect, but they really only needed some light oiling and some light scrubbing. In a moment, we'll be moving on from talking about the metal components of this rifle, but make sure to stick around because at the very end of the video, I'll be showing a few of the stampings that I found on this rifle, and maybe we can play detective together to determine the origin and history of this particular piece. So to rewind a little bit, when I first pulled apart the stock, I found all kinds of organic debris inside. That included grass, feathers, and compacted dirt, and who knows what else. I think maybe even some bug skeletons. This kind of buildup doesn't necessarily just come from handling, it comes from sitting for decades in a barn. Unfortunately, time has not been friendly to this handguard, and it's been split and it needs to be repaired. We'll work on that later after the cleaning. So the first stage was purely mechanical. I am carefully picking away and scraping out the caked on dirt from the inletting. That's all the carved surfaces inside the stock where the metal pieces fit in. The dirt here has built up over time and is an issue because it holds moisture into the wood and traps excess oil, which is the last thing you want because it can damage the wood. Once the heavy dirt was out of the way, I moved to cleaning the surface of the stock. So instead of using soap and water, I am actually using mineral spirits here. In my opinion, mineral spirits seems to be gentler on older wood because it does a good job cleaning the surface grime without necessarily soaking in and trapping moisture. And it also doesn't raise the grain the way water does. Now that most of the worst surface dirt is off, the oil saturation is an issue I need to address here. The symptoms here are really pretty clear. Large sections of the stock have darkened so much that the wood grain is almost impossible to see. Some areas are overly polished and glossy, especially around the wrist and along the forend, which tells me oil has been soaking in there for decades. There is also small cracks starting to open near the toe of the stock, a classic symptom. The oil isn't just in the surface. Over time, it softens wood fibers, traps moisture, and weakens the structure from the inside. Left alone, it accelerates cracking, rot, and long-term failure. This wouldn't have been much of a concern for the French resistance, as survival came first. But my goal here is preservation. Before this rifle can go back together, that oil has to be dealt with, or everything I've done so far has been a waste. By carefully heating section by section, the oil raises to the surface. When the wood starts to turn shiny, that's the oil coming to the surface, and I can dab it with a cloth or paper towel to absorb as much of that as possible. The transformation here is actually pretty fascinating to watch, because little by little, the wood grain appears. What used to be blackened and grimy slowly lightens to the point where you can actually see the grain again, and you start to see the pattern, and it really looks nice. After all of that, the surface is pretty rough. I use a little bit of steel wool to knock down the rough edges. With most of the wood cleaned and stabilized, it's time to fix that split handguard we found earlier. This is one of the rare cases where I do actually use acetone on the wood, which is usually a terrible idea. Acetone pulls out oils aggressively that can damage the wood if you're not careful, but in this case, that's exactly what I needed. There was so much oil soaked into this handguard that glue simply wouldn't bond properly unless I removed it. So I used acetone to strip away the oil from the crack, and then I let it fully dry. And then worked waterproof wood glue deep into that split. After clamping and letting it cure, I cleaned up the seam, gave the handguard the same final cleaning as the rest of the stock, and then I applied an even coat of tung oil over the entire wood of the rifle, including that handguard. I'm not flooding it with tung oil, just enough to refresh the surface, protect the wood, and bring everything back to life. We're now getting so close to probably one of my favorite parts of this project, the reassembly, but the metal parts I need to apply a very fine coat of 100% mineral oil. I'm using mineral oil because in my opinion it's much gentler on the wood than most gun oils. And finally, we're at the reassembly. This is the part I've been excited about from the very beginning because I can finally see it come all together. One thing I did not mention earlier on is that I am using a few replacement parts that I got from Hunter's Lodge to replace broken or missing pieces, but those were prepped right alongside the original pieces, cleaned as they were dirty as well. And so now everything can go back together in the reverse order that I took them off. And wow, it does look so much better, and it is such a reward to see it. Of course, I want to test fire it. Unfortunately, I only had blanks for it. And like a lot of people, I was using 7.62x54R for the monoliquor. Not technically the correct blanks, but they were so close that they're often used. Now, they're commonly using brass, which is a key factor. I am using, in this test, steel. The problem with steel is it does not fireform like brass, and it does not fireform to the chamber. As a result, 1 out of 5 of my blanks split. Not major, just minor, but enough to have a tiny bit of gas that blew back towards me. Not a huge safety concern, but enough to raise a red flag that I was not comfortable using it at reenactments. Nothing going down range either. Better to be safe than sorry. So, as a result, I'm on the market looking for some new blanks.
Projects like this are exactly why I love working with historic firearms. If you enjoyed this project, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also comment. There will be photos at the very end of this video that show the stampings of this rifle. Let me know if you know what any of these stamps mean. I would love to hear from you. Also, if you're on a mobile device, check to see if the hype button is available. Click that and it will really help this channel. Back to this rifle. This rifle isn't just metal and wood, it's base components. It's a mechanical system, a survival of decades of neglect, and a reminder how these were treated more as tools than an item to preserve and protect. Because that wasn't the priority during those times. It's a reminder of things gone by. Its dings and scratches are not seen as imperfections in my eyes, but a testament of the stories and struggles and conflict that this witnessed that have been lost to time. My hope for this particular rifle is that it will continue to tell its stories for generations to come. This is Brave Builds, where history, kit, and reenacting come together to help us build a better understanding of their bravery, because their stories deserve to be remembered.